no space agency, no mapping organization, and in entire country there was only one remote sensing specialist available. So we can understand that those countries still do not have baseline databases and they don't know how to use satellite data. But I have been also to another country, Philippines, where they have the space agencies, they have access, they have mapping agencies. And also to India, I have done some missions and some training programs with NIDM. Srija is here, with whom we cooperate. And there also what we have seen that India is almost on top with remote sensing data, but still we found that some of the states, they are not very well prepared in terms of the background information. So having the samples from different countries like this, which do not have space agency, which are very good space agencies, what we have realized that three kind of challenges. One is non-availability of baseline and thematic spatial data in the framework of GIS. This is a very common problem in most of the countries. Second type of countries, the baseline and thematic spatial data may be available, but scattered at different places with non-uniform data standards, which limit data integration. So I recollect I was in Samoa with our team, and we saw they have a lot of spatial data, but it is scattered in different government agencies, and these agencies, they don't talk to each other. They create data in their own formats, own proprietary softwares, and when there was tsunami in 2009 in Samoa, this data nobody could use because every data was in different format. So finally, regional organization like you have EC-Mode here, they have organization in Fiji, that's called SOPAC. They have to come in and they could produce some maps for handling emergencies during tsunami. So that is the challenge. Third case is that baseline and thematic spatial data may be well organized centrally, but not integrated with risk-related data. So somebody has very good data on natural resources management, but aspects on disaster management or risk-related data is completely missing. So with these three kind of challenges, my presentation will focus on some of the ideas. It's basically food for thought for discussion and message to take back to the country and organizations. So what we talk here is information readiness. Each country prepared for handling disaster, and if is information readiness is up to the standards. So here we talk about the spatial and non-spatial data, and then we also talk of the data that will cater the requirements at all the stages of disaster, pre-disaster and post-disasters. So spatial and non-spatial data should necessarily be useful for all the stages of disaster management, including the requirements for developmental planning. And as you know, the spatial data is maps, images, or any data that has a geo coordinates, and non-spatial data which will link to that spatial data, and then one can see it in the form of maps or pie charts or different kind of visual products. So the spatial data that is most important if you want to really make use of space-based information during emergencies is baseline data, data on utility infrastructure, disaster-specific data, thematic data on terrain and natural resources, near real-time satellite data, and thematic maps. These are broad 5 categories we have listed. You can find also there is a paper in Dr. Vasanta Sreshta's presentation. He showed one booklet, JBG, Best Practices in Disaster Management. In that best practices, this paper is also there for detailed reading. So when we talk of baseline data, in many countries this baseline data is available in the form of topographical sheets, which as shown on one side. And this is the reference data on which various themes can be added. So the baseline data should necessarily talk about roads, rivers, stream, water bodies, topographical parameters, and other permanent features and infrastructure. But even in many countries we have seen that even this data don't exist. Some countries have this data in paper format, but they don't allow to scan or digitize. So there are a lot of data policy issues to discuss about, and that's why sometimes this baseline data don't exist, and in absence of baseline data, you can't really do any other thing if this base is missing. And this data has a lot of relevance in disaster management. If you have administrative units like villages, tehsils, districts, and state boundaries, then you can relate complete demographic data. Which one? Then you can relate demographic data with that, and demographic data normally available for entire population, talks about various aspects of socioeconomic parameters. So if you have administrative units, you can link demography and socioeconomic details to these maps, and one can also connect this particular database to amenities like if you have army, fire stations, police stations, medical services, schools, evacuation points and all. So this is wholesome data, and if disaster happens, one can just get a recent satellite data, get the extent of disaster, and if you superimpose that data on this particular, you have the information which is needed for the planners. So if there is in group, sometimes if we have some representation from disaster management authorities or civil defense organization, they would appreciate this so much. Although for technologists like us, this is a quite a basic thing to understand. Then second aspect of this data is utility and infrastructure. And everybody knows that this particular data is critical while planning the risk reduction and response. So transport network. We always, whenever disaster happens, we activate international charter, we request Central Asia, and there are many other mechanisms. They come in the picture and they work on this. So one of the important maps that help during emergencies is transport network. So they superimpose transport network and they find which bridges are blocked, which bridges are broken, which access roads are now blocked. This was one of the very critical information. Also, one needs information of electricity network, because in order to store electricity, you need to know where is the infrastructure. Cadastral details. This has not been given much attention really in disaster management. People think that this particular information is required only for revenue collection or agricultural management. But when I was interacting with UN Habitat Organization, and also now I was just thinking when I saw Imran Iqbal here, and I just asked question myself. Vast area, the agriculture has been completely now submerged, and you may not find the boundaries as they were existing before. And if the issue comes that millions will come and ask that, I want my land back. I claim that I had 50 acres of land in this flooded area and I need my land back, and he goes to government. Does government have this particular information? So I can give one good example. In India, government of Maharashtra, they use panchromatic data of Indian remote sensing satellite, 5.6 meter resolution data, and they created cadastral map for entire state, and it is available in a GIS domain. So now any claim comes in case of any disaster, they can easily identify the person who is claiming the land back, how much land he had, where the land was. So this is particularly quite important layer, not only for government revenue collection or administrative purpose, for disaster management also. And persons from UN Habitat specifically requested us if you can promote this particular awareness among the member states. And of course, region-specific utility network. There are a lot of utilities like gas pipelines, oil pipelines, canal network, bridges. They also become important in case of disaster to know what is going to happen to this network. Next layer of data, one should be ready. And ready for this is a disaster risk-related data. And this data is normally collected from multiple sources. Every country has a different mechanism and different agencies to have this data in the custody. In India, it is relief commissioners in the states. They collect this data, and this data comes from district disaster management plans. Many other countries I have seen, they call civil defense organization. They have such kind of data. And normally what I have seen is there is a big gap between disaster managers and GIS, geoinformatics community within the country. They don't talk. I mean, we have seen this in almost all the country without failure, even in Europe. Yeah. So if this data is available with geoinformatics community, then they can very well relate this data to disaster-related spatial data. And for example, there are many reports, such data. This is one example from Maldives. There are such many data available in UNDP reports, but this data is not in the form of GIS. So nobody can really use this data unless this data is captured in GIS and then put in the common system. Then one should talk about the thematic data on natural resources. And when you talk of thematic data, you think of elevation and slope. And nowadays, this data also comes from space-based information. You know about the SRTM and ASTER satellites, which gives you elevation data. Then your global land use maps, local land use maps created by different agencies, forest type, geology, soil. All this information, most of the information comes from satellite data, but it is available in the form of thematic maps. And if this information is available with the disaster managers, you can go for sustainable land use development, water resource development, wasteland development, urban development, watershed. Many areas you can address, And in a way, you are contributing to mainstreaming the disaster risk reduction, because disaster risk reduction is not a single isolated area. One has to really go through the multi-sectoral approach, follow multi-sectoral approach, and that way you manage the disasters. So having the thematic maps can contribute to really sustainable development, and then you can mainstream that data into disaster risk reduction. And last one is the near real-time satellite data. You have data right from 1 centimeter or sub-centimeter resolution to the bird's eye views like Aster or many other NOAA satellites. So if you have emergencies, your GIS databases should be ready to accept data from satellite data, near real-time satellite data, for tackling emergency observation, early recovery planning, and mitigation purpose. And this is my last slide. This talks about the concept of disaster management information system. I have listed the same database which I just now talked. So if country is prepared with the baseline data, utility infrastructure data, disaster-specific data, thematic data, and near real-time satellite data or thematic maps, and if one follows the concepts of national spatial data infrastructure, that is data standardization, then data can sit in one domain in geographical information system, and whenever disasters strike, you can use that data for disasters.
You gave in the beginning, I mean, that reflects the entire scenario. I mean, in the region also and beyond the region also. I mean, as far as the availability of data is concerned. But if you look at each of the member countries, I mean, we have the NSDI. You know, almost every country has, and this spatial and non-spatial data is existing. But the problem is, I mean, that is what I think in this pre-symposium we should be discussing. I mean, there are tabus, there are certain, you know, difficulties in sharing this data with the countries, I mean, the organizations like ACMOD. I mean, despite all the benefits of sharing this data, I mean, I think all the countries, if you look at the demographic data, if you look at the socioeconomic data, it is in the digital format now. But when we look, I mean, at the time of disaster, I mean, like in Pakistan or even in India or any other country, we are facing problems in sharing of this data. I mean, we need to discuss, I mean, why it is, despite that it has all the benefits for the countries, but people are reluctant to share this data. Just a comment.
Perfect. Comment is valid, and that's why this topic becomes important, that we should discuss this. And I still feel that still there is need of, I mean, this intergovernmental organization, regional organization to take lead to promote this kind of culture.